Okay, before the break, we kind of wrapped up some odds and ends that we ran out of time for last week, and a couple points from the lab that I wanted to wait till after y'all did the lab for this week before I talked about them. Our main topic this week is cybersecurity. It's a very big field. I was looking through the data reports this morning, and cybersecurity and the IT, cybersecurity and software development really stand out. Like on visual representations of the data, most of the school of IT have cybersecurity. We have that nice little bar chart, and cybersecurity and software development would be huge bars that in order to make them on the field, some of our other things would be really, really small. There was one year couldn't even see it, like just a line for one of the degrees because there were so many cybersecurity software development people. So one of the very popular IT programs to go into, definitely by far the most people go into it. Sort of a big deal, right? We want to keep our data safe. Makes sense why those are the most popular, right? The software developers, those are the people that have an interest in how we handle the data, how we process it, manipulate our data from turn it into information and knowledge and make it useful and applicable. But we do that because it's useful and applicable, which means people with less ethical or more malicious motives might want that same data, right? They don't want access to it. So we need to secure the data as well. And that can be a difficult thing to do. So there are a few things that the best thing to do is sort of mitigation and education, awareness. That's a big part of it, is making sure that people know what to watch out for. Has anybody had to undergo like cybersecurity training for your work at any point? Probably like a little video and a quiz, things like that. I don't see a whole lot of responses. It's a very common thing because the number one tool we have to mitigate threats is education, if making sure people know about it. Okay, yeah, I figured there was at least one veteran in here, and I know the veterans undergo cybersecurity training. So they pop up in the chat room. It's education. So for cybersecurity experts, that's one of the things you're going to be responsible for, is educating all the employees of the company, making sure they know what to watch out for and know what to do and how to do it. So to start the list of terms for cybersecurity, because at this introduction level, that's kind of what we have to do. Just like that stuff right before the break, list out the words in, I guess, preview mode here, so that when you're being tested on much more heavily in a cybersecurity class specifically, they're not brand new terms. You've heard them before. You kind of know what they mean. So I guess the first thing to talk about is some common attacks to watch out for. Let's start there. Cyber attacks. Things we want to watch out for. So the first one, these are not in order of severity. I wrote down the list as I thought about them and then double checked against some other lists and threw some others, threw some I forgot on the end. So not in order of severity, just I guess a random order here. What we call man in the middle attacks. I guess the technical way to say it is the attacker inserts themselves in the middle of a transaction. Attacker inserts themselves into a transaction. So we have that word's going to show up in normal English a lot, right? We think about that as like business and sales transaction, but we're talking about a network transaction here. This would be the one common in like coffee shops. So maybe you're at a coffee shop, have your laptop set up on some table, and over by the counter of the coffee shop is where they have the router that you need to get to the rest of the internet. So a man in the middle attack would be like somebody else at that coffee shop, setting up a spot in the middle. I'll draw the stick man differently here. So I'll fill that in. I have white chalk. Usually I'm thinking about using a black marker on a whiteboard these days. But when I fill it in, that's going to refer to like a black hat. The black hat is a traditional Hollywood thing is where it comes from. Somehow it played on some early people's expectations, and traditionally heroes would wear light colored hats and the bad guys would wear dark colored hats. And it really plays into people's expectations. Like some big directors in Hollywood were even able to spin that around and put the heroes in a dark colored hat just to kind of confuse people, or put a bunch of villains in light colored hats and the good guys in dark colored hats, and it kind of messed with people's expectations and stuff when they did that. So we have the term black hat from that. You can think of the old westerns. The bad guys always wore that the darker colored hats. And I'll just fill it in when I draw the pictures. But a man in the middle attack, instead of our computer sending a signal off to get to the coffee shop router and then off to the internet, maybe the attacker here in the middle has like his own little router, so that it, or some sort of setup, so it's actually his router that picks our stuff up, and he'll record all that information and then transmit it to the actual router. So we're still sitting here at our computer browsing the internet like we expected. Right? We put something in the address bar in the browser, we go to that page, see all the information like we were expecting. But there's one extra machine en route that we didn't realize about, where somebody is just grabbing all of our data, all of the data in there. So it's the transaction between, like, say, our laptop and that coffee shop router. They just insert themselves into the middle of that and physically grab all of the data en route. VPNs are a great defense against that. A virtual private network. So instead of directly accessing the internet, we have our own virtual network, kind of a fake network set up on our machine, so that instead of just broadcasting everything, we're going through that virtual network in order to get to the router. And then we have heightened security protocols and things right there on our machine. Is a good way to get around that. The big thing is the attacker physically inserts themselves. This would be one Hollywood shows a lot, right? Like anytime spies in a movie or bank robbers in a movie or something need to get into a security system, they actually go to some panel box and connect to the wires right there on the circuit board. Right? They're tying in and grabbing all that network information as it flows past and messing with it. So actually inserting themselves in a transaction between two machines. is sort of the first one. It's okay if I erase this. And that was my plan, draw pictures and stuff.
Yes, sir.
Talk about these words. Because we're not going to test heavily on them today, but you will be tested on heavily in future classes. And our main form of mitigation is to educate people, and we want to start seeing it in different routes, because when you go to educate all the other employees at your company, they probably don't speak high technical language, right? They probably don't speak IT. They might speak whatever their field is. They speak accounting language or healthcare language and not IT language. So if all you can do is recite the formal definition, they're going to be a bit confused. You want to make sure you understand all of these concepts. The next big one we hear about the most often, denial of service. Flood of traffic intended to bog down resources. So normally we would have that client server interaction. We've seen that picture before, right? We have some sort of client machine. I'll just draw a little laptop. And somewhere through the network, through a hub, switch, those pieces we talked about last week, really what that computer wants to do is connect to a server somewhere on the network. And the server is going to fill any request that computer has. And we talk about port numbers. Both machines agree what port they're connecting to. And that server can only handle so many connections at once, right? Servers can usually handle a lot of machines connecting to them, but it is a finite number. It doesn't increase forever. So if we set something up that would just bog all those down, so instead of forming one connection to that server, this machine formed a whole bunch of connections to that server. That server no longer has any connections left for somebody else to access. And somebody else wants that same site, it's going to come over here and can't really gain access to the server because somebody else already bogged it down. It's a very, very common one. Should I do this guy? Might as well. And protecting against that is a lot harder than doing that. I'm an open terminal here just because I'm going to stretch this out for a couple of days. So something like this, one of the things we did in last week's lab was ping another machine, right? So like ping ivlearn.ivtech.edu to see if it's there. We get some replies. I think this will time out after a second. Okay, yeah. So it pinged it, and a ping is just a single bit. A single bit plus all that other stuff in the OSI model we talked about before the break. So there's a lot more overhead in a ping, way, way more overhead than anything else. But we get that. Connected to that server, it received our bit and sent back a single bit. So I'll just use that. What if we did something else? Yeah, I'll just set up a variable here. X is 3. Put some number in a variable. We saw software development last week or the week before, maybe 2 weeks ago. It seems like it was fairly recently. I just finished catching up on the grading. But then we can write instructions to do things repeatedly. Like say, while X is less than 5, I'll ping that machine. It's not quite a full one here. But when it starts doing this, that machine has to respond to our thing. So it sent that ping and tied up that connection. A real denial of service attack would be a lot more than a ping. That's not enough to tie up the connection for long, but the concept's there. We tied up this connection. And while this connection's tied up, we tied up this one. And then this one, you see how it's continually doing that thing. I'll cancel out of that. And what I wanted to look at, if I just hit up a couple times, it did not take much code to just repeatedly do things with a particular server. A ping is a very simplified example. We would probably do more than that in an actual attack. We would ask the server for more than one bit in an actual attack, but we could still do it very, very quickly, right? Like one line in a loop is going to start tying up that server. And if that server has to respond to us, it's a machine. It's never going to figure out that something's going on its own. Nobody else can access that machine while we're doing things. So that's the big thing with a denial of service attack, is it is really, really easy to write that. I oversimplified the example by far. Hopefully you realize that a ping is not going to be a cause of denial of service attack, but it wouldn't take much more code to do something that would really bog down a computer. And if every point of access to that server is connected from one line of code in a loop, maybe this is the IT guy. Right? This is the IT department trying to get in there and stop that denial of service attack. But they can't get to the server either. So a very, very simple attack to create, but kind of a difficult one to stop. Because the people that could do something about it can't get access to the server either. So we hear about those a lot. Yeah, the regular cloud platforms, AWS, GCP, Azure, they constantly monitor for that. And if they think one of your servers launched a denial of service attack on another server, they will be in contact very, very shortly and have you answer questions about that. Because it's a very simple attack to create, but kind of a difficult attack to block. The next one on the list here may not be the most common one that's out there, but they still happen a lot. And that's something called SQL injections. So we looked at databases. Y'all might remember that from way back in week 2 or 3. It was a while ago. And working with databases, we have structured query language. Or in non-relational databases, we have some sort of programming language that we use to access and control that database. It still falls under this category, even if we're using non-relational databases. And another thing about those is they're often going to be accessed across the internet, right? When we think database, we're usually thinking of something big, like a company-wide database that lots and lots of people are going to try to access. So we need to set that up on the network so that it's accessed across the network. But if the database is left unsecured, people can gain access. I think I have an example. It's another one I can do an example of real quick. And this one is all about education to stop this one, because it is specifically if the programmers forget to secure the database, it can easily be accessed. I probably should have pulled this example down beforehand. I was thinking I would just do definitions today, but definitions get really boring really quick, right? Let's look at a better explanation on what's going on with this. I think I have one here somewhere that is like ready to use for this. I have to look through. Nope, I don't see the one I was thinking of. I might have to do this. Oh, what that is. I guess I could write one real quick. How long would that take? It'd probably take 10 minutes to write it. I'll write one and do an example of this on Thursday. I thought I had an example I could download, but it would take about 10 minutes to write it. So y'all probably don't want to sit there and watch me write code for 10 minutes. SQL injection.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, it would also go a lot of code typed in 10 minutes. Much faster than I'll prefer to type in classroom examples. So I will prepare an example for that. But basically, if we leave the database sort of open in certain ways, so we'll have the programming script connected to the website that can do things with the database, access stuff and retrieve the data from it. And I should have dug through and figured out which one would have a good example of it, since I apparently deleted the very obvious example of it. Unless it's on my GitHub page. Yeah, I'll get that ready for Thursday. But there's different ways we can do that. We can put an entire SQL statement into our database and then run that through there. Or we can parameterize things and take in just the pieces of it, and then the code puts it back together. And if not careful, really, that's what the if left unsecured thing is. If we set it so that the website itself passes in an entire query, then anybody that has an address bar, anybody that has a browser can pass in an entire SQL query and have direct access to our database and reprogram the database. Since I was talking about a short example might be in like search results. So I don't know, if I go over to YouTube and search for funny cat videos, there's a little thing here where we can put in some keywords of what we want to look for. And it pulls up the videos, but what you may not have paid attention to before is what goes up here. That thing we typed in the little search bar for the computer to look for gets passed in through the address bar. So we could type that directly. .com/results. And then whenever there's a question mark, that means we're getting ready to pass in parameters that that the scripts connected to that website will know what to do with. And if we know what those are, such as for YouTube, search_query equals something, equals, oh no, I'll do something different. Silly dog videos. we can access their database without actually going to their website in order to do so. We just pass in the instruction for their database, which on the YouTube search videos, that obviously that's not a big deal, right? But in other situations, that could become a very, very big deal very, very quickly. So it's a really, really easy thing for software developers to avoid. That's why I actually want to go through an example of it. I'll dig through my files and see if I can find the one I was thinking about, or write another one. It'll only take about 10 minutes to write it, and go through an example of it so that software developers see how easy it is to avoid it. Because that statement, if left unsecured, sounds like it could be a very big thing, right? Like a huge, huge hard ordeal. But it is really, really, really easy to secure against a SQL injection. Just that a lot of people don't do it. A lot of people just set their database up in the way that's easiest for them. And it's not hard to do. We'll look at an example of that coming up. But just like we did with the YouTube page, we can access their database without actually going to their website, just from any address bar we have, which on YouTube is not a big deal. Obviously, theirs is very secure, right? We can't go on there and get people's credit card info. I had a problem with that. Was it last weekend? Yeah, it worked this weekend. But on Sunday nights, I like to buy a pizza and rent a movie. I just rent a movie off YouTube usually. And last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago, I was having trouble even getting my own card information there on YouTube. Somehow it switched. It updated, and whenever it updated, it would not access my known credit card. I had to end up going to PayPal and go through PayPal to rent the movie that 2 Sundays ago, I guess. So theirs is highly secure. Like sometimes it's even hard to get to our own information. And during a recent update, it was hard. If YouTube already knows your credit card information, it was suddenly hard to get to. But they appear to have fixed that. So there's different levels too, right? Because sometimes SQL injection, technically that thing I just did to pull up the dog videos there from YouTube would be a SQL injection. It's just not a bad one. It's just an alternate way of getting there, but that can be very, very bad very, very quickly, but it's a very easy thing to secure against. So we'll look at an example of that. Password attack. Might be a good next one for the list. This is a very common one. Gain access by obtaining someone's password. So there's lots of ways to gain somebody's password. Next week when we do virtual machines, in our class example, I think the lab manual had you stick a spin up an Ubuntu machine. And for class example, I'll probably spin up Kali Linux. So Kali Linux has some nice tools for that. We might look at something that would quickly crack passwords and run some software to show how quick the automated processes can be. But there's other ways to gain people's passwords, right? We don't necessarily have to use an automated password, password to find, or an automated process to find somebody's password. There are a lot of things that would make a good guess, right? Like their pets' names, their children's names, birthdays, or PIN numbers. That'd be a lot more common with PIN numbers. Is if we looked around and check different databases and social media and stuff, there's a pretty good chance we might find what 4-digit number is important to a person, or at least a short list of 4-digit numbers that would be important to a person. That's into something called social engineering. So instead of using the computers themselves, we actually look at the person in the physical world to find out that information, that so that we would have some good guesses on what their password might be, what their favorite, which one of their pets was their favorite, different combinations of the letters in their kids' names, people's birthdays, things like that. Humans can be very, very predictable at times. And hackers can use that to their advantage. That was pretty straightforward. Probably don't need a much more example on password attack. Obtaining password is the hard part. They're automated processes. We could have software just brute force, randomly try every combination of characters. Those are the easier than it's made out to be, right? So I'll do the standard example, right? Humans might think, okay, I need a password, so I'll make something that looks very, very strange. It has letters and dollar signs, a letter there. W-O. What something looks like an R? Is there a symbol on there that looks kind of like an R? Not really. I'll throw an ampersand in there, just have another symbol. Ampersand D. A human would be like, okay, there's all kinds of random letters and symbols. That'd be really hard to guess. It'd be really hard for a human to guess. For a computer, it has no idea what those symbols mean, right? The computer just, a computer's a mindless machine. If it's going to try to crack a password, it's going to try every combination of letters and symbols. It doesn't know the difference between them. Every character on there. Brute force password crackers waste a lot of time trying different things with the space bar in them, because humans will almost never put a space in their password. For some reason, people always think of one-word passwords, or a lot of password restrictions block a space. But the brute force password crackers waste lots and lots of time trying different combinations that would have the space bar in them. So a computer, that is no harder than if we actually spelled out the word password. It just makes it harder for a human. Makes it harder for you to remember. Really long passwords are what's better for those. So passphrases. Something like heavy butterfly battery. Just 3 random words. And as humans, we could form a picture in our mind of that, right? Like actually have a picture of a battery in our mind and put little butterfly wings on it. And then we would remember that, we'll remember that forever because of the picture we can associate it with. Or the punchline from a joke or something like that, that would be really, really easy for a human to remember, as opposed to all those weird characters, right? When we start throwing weird characters in the word, we're probably gonna forget those in like 6 or 7 letter words, really short things. We get a big long sentence, if we can form a picture out of it, we'll basically remember it forever. And there's a lot of letters here, so for an automated process to crack that, it has to try a lot of combinations before it will figure out what that is. The odds are lower, right? There is always that chance it'll guess this on the first try, but the longer our password is, the less likely that is. to happen. So the best defense against passwords is password attacks, is really secure passwords. And it throws people off, but the really secure passwords are just really long ones. The longer you can make it, the better. The passphrases. And if you can associate it with something like a mental picture in your mind or a punchline to a joke or something that you will remember, it's a much, much better password all around, because then you're not going to forget how you put the special characters and arbitrary combination of upper and lowercase letters. It just has a lot of letters, which makes it hard for others to guess it. What time is it? 2:30. About 5 more minutes. Yeah. It's okay if I erase this. I think everybody's probably heard that before. And that's going to be the biggest thing with cybersecurity, is educating the people who aren't cybersecurity professionals, making sure they know things like that, making sure they know how to come up with a good password that'll be hard to guess. Something like that one I just erased, that would be really hard to figure out social engineering somebody's thing too, right? You can dig all the way through their Facebook feed going back 7 or 8 years, and you probably never see anything that would indicate a password like that. What's next on the list? Cross-site scripting. Cross-site scripting. And so this is when a hacker inserts malicious code onto a legitimate website. Which would get transmitted to the client. So key part there is it's a legitimate website. It's like Ivy Learn. Somebody somehow gained access to the servers hosting our Ivy Learn learning management system and added a little script in there that's going to run on everybody's computer that accesses Ivy Learn and do something. Gain access to information. There are several levels of sensitive and secure information around a school. So there's a lot of things people might want to try to get in there. Tuition is kind of expensive, right? Even at a community college, community colleges usually have always have the lowest tuition by far, but paying for class is still pretty expensive. So there's a lot of financial data there. People's personal identifiable information. People tend to reuse passwords. So if you got their school password, you might have access to, you might be able, or you'd have a better guess at some of their other passwords. And then secure information, background things, and healthcare information, HIPAA and FERPA and all those other government restricted ones. But Christ, inserting malicious code onto a legitimate website, and the key part is a legitimate website. If it's a fake website that's sole purpose is to do that, then it's something different than cross-site scripting. So like the cross part, the script is coming from someplace we did not expect it to. It can also be worked into man-in-the-middle attacks. If it's for like an attack, instead of just collecting information, that man in the middle could add a script in to those packets as they get transmitted back to your computer. Yeah, that one's pretty straightforward. We go to a real website and somebody had already hacked into that website, which Obviously, in that case, there's not a lot we can do on our end to protect against that. Hopefully that website was protected against. So that's sort of the idea of widespread cybersecurity. It needs to be everywhere to the sites we go to, not just our own stuff. IoT attacks are kind of a big one. Internet of Things, I believe we've mentioned that already somewhere, right? All of our things that are not computers, connecting them to the network so that we get the power of computers on them. A couple of examples I always like to use is like automating the coffee maker and connecting that to a phone on the button, so that when you're heading home after work or something, and you're gonna want a cup of coffee as soon as you get there, you can push a button on the phone, and then there's a fresh pot of coffee when you get home. You don't have to wait 10 more minutes for one to make. Or put a scale in your refrigerator, because that scale can easily determine how much milk there is sitting on it. And then if your phone GPS says you're at Kroger, the refrigerator can remind you to pick up milk because there's not much weight sitting on the shelf. Getting computer benefits from all of our things that aren't computers. But we think about securing our computers, right? Talk about all those passwords and stuff. Earlier this summer, I went and bought 2 window units. Actually, one of them's a traditional window unit, and the other one's the one that sits in the middle of the room and has a vent to the window, because I wanted to compare them and see how well they work and stuff. But I bought 2 small air conditioners, and the option of connecting those air conditioners to the internet, it was not optional. I'm not sure where I was originally going with that sentence, but it was not optional to connect those to the internet. When I plugged them up and turned them on, they connected to the router, and then I was supposed to scan a QR code with my phone and have controls for those window units from the phone. And I didn't install the app. They have remotes as well, so I just used the remotes. I didn't put the app on my phone, but I could not stop those air conditioners from connecting to the Wi-Fi here in my house. But how secure are those air conditioners? I never really messed with it at all. And that's sort of the idea here. Many connected devices are overlooked. You probably have great security on your phone, your computer, but what about your TV? Or what about your thermostat? Your refrigerator? All of those other devices in our modern world, are they as secure as your phone and main computer and all the things we normally think about with these issues? Typically they're not, and that is a way in a malicious person could gain access to your home network through those devices. Which again, back to education. Just remember to secure those devices. So if you're a cybersecurity person, mitigating these sort of attacks is just a matter of reminding people to secure their thermostat. So make sure you put a password on your thermostat. Don't just set it so that the swipe on your phone will immediately get you to the button on the thermostat, because other people can immediately get to that button on your thermostat just as easily if you do that. So back to the education idea of it. Cybersecurity experts are going to spend a lot of time educating non-cybersecurity experts about the things they need to be aware of. I have one more attack on here, so that probably seems like a good place to split the list up. Ransomware. This is a big deal these days. Basically, hackers come in And instead of the traditional one we talk about the most of stealing information or implanting a virus, they just lock down the system. And demand payment. So they'll like come into your business and change the passwords on your database. So then no employees can access the company database, which is going to prevent work from getting done. Customers can't access the database either, or whatever it is. They'll actually lock you out of your own system and demand some sort of payment to release it. Demand payment to release it. And that's kind of a big deal because a lot of people, they don't have choices. They can't shut it down. It happened in Louisville about 3 years ago. I think it was 2019. A new healthcare center opened, and the very first day, somebody locked down their system and demanded money to release it. And that's a hospital, right? Lives depend on that. They can't delay. They have to get that system opened back up immediately, especially at a hospital, because lives depend on that system. So they just paid it. They opened it back up, and I'm not sure what came of that afterwards. But any business, that's going to cause big problems. And then there's another issue here that has happened to some people, that to release it, they suddenly can't get in their system, and they get a demand, then end up with a demand to make a payment saying their system's been locked down and they have to give money to, if they want access to it again. And they make the payment, but then turns out the system wasn't locked down. Somebody completely destroyed their system and just made it look like it was locked down. And after making that payment, they can't get back to anything. That's happened a few times to people. So this is a big one to watch out for. A lot harder to protect against, I guess. You will talk about that in more detail in future classes. All right, so have several more pages of definitions, but that brings us to the end of attacks. So that's probably a good halfway point on those lecture notes, and we can do more listing things out on Thursday, because it's a long list of things to go through. Basically, long list of terms related to cybersecurity is the lecture portion for this. So we can split it up, and that leaves us a little over an hour of time, which should be blocked off on your schedule specifically. So, right, your schedule should say that you're going to learn IT from 1 to 3:50. So it leaves us an hour of time, and it's a very active subject. We learn by doing. So now is a great time to go do some stuff and actively learn. Does anybody have any questions before we wrap up here? I know there were some questions for afterwards. We'll address those here in just a moment, but. Okay, I assume that means no questions about today's content. So we'll pick up there on Thursday, and yeah, this section's just a long list of terms. There's not really much we can do except list them out. We'll look at a SQL injection example then as well, so you can see how easy it is to protect against that for the software developers, so you don't accidentally make that mistake and leave your database open that way. Otherwise, I will see y'all on Thursday. If you have any questions, let me know. As always, I'll be sitting here till 3:50 waiting for questions. Otherwise, y'all have a good one, and I'll see you Thursday.
Have a good day.